Ladies and gentlemen, today is not an ordinary Tuesday, and you are not standing in an ordinary moment. This is December 16, 2025, a day that has been marked by heaven for forward movement, clarity, and divine breakthrough. If you have felt resistance without reason, delays without explanation, pressure without proof, hear this clearly. What you cannot see has been working against you, but what you cannot see has also been working for you. Some barriers are not physical, yet they are powerful. They show up as confusion, fatigue, discouragement, missed opportunities, and sudden distractions. But no invisible wall is stronger than the authority God has placed on your life. You did not wake up today by accident. You woke up with purpose, with power, and with permission to break through. This moment is a call to rise in faith and refuse to accept limitation as your portion. You are not behind, you are being positioned. You are not blocked, you are being redirected by divine wisdom. As we enter this prayer, prepare your spirit to shift. Expect resistance to crumble, clarity to return, and doors to open that no force can shut. What tried to delay you will not define you. What tried to block you will bow. Today, every unseen barrier must give way. Because when prayer speaks, heaven responds, and nothing seen or unseen can stand in the way of a life aligned with God's will. Invisible barriers are real. Even when they cannot be named, measured, or explained, they operate silently, shaping outcomes, influencing decisions, and resisting progress without ever announcing their presence. Many people assume that if something cannot be seen, it cannot be responsible for what they are experiencing. Yet life repeatedly proves the opposite. There are forces that work beneath the surface of the natural world, forces that affect momentum, clarity, energy, and direction. These barriers often show up as patterns, consistent delays, repeated frustration, unexplained heaviness, sudden confusion, or opportunities that almost materialize but never fully manifest. When effort is applied but results remain limited, when preparation is present but advancement feels blocked, it is often not a lack of ability or discipline, but the presence of resistance that operates beyond the physical realm. Invisible barriers thrive in denial. The moment a person refuses to acknowledge that unseen resistance exists, it gains permission to remain unchallenged. Many people exhaust themselves trying harder, pushing longer, and striving more aggressively, believing that intensity alone will break through. But effort without discernment often leads to burnout instead of breakthrough. Invisible barriers are not impressed by human strength. They respond only to spiritual authority. This is why some of the most capable, talented, and gifted individuals still experience stagnation. The issue is not potential, but obstruction. These barriers do not attack worth. They target timing, flow, and access. They work quietly, often convincing individuals that they are the problem, that they are inadequate, late, or unqualified, when in truth something external is interfering with their progress. These unseen barriers are strategic. They do not always block everything at once. Instead, they interfere just enough to cause discouragement, doubt, and hesitation. They delay answers, distort perception, and weaken resolve. They make small obstacles feel overwhelming and large goals feel unreachable. Over time, this constant resistance can reshape expectations, causing people to settle for less than what was originally envisioned. What begins as an invisible barrier eventually manifests as visible compromise, where dreams shrink, standards lower, and faith becomes cautious rather than bold. This is why awareness is critical. Once a barrier is recognized, it loses the power of secrecy, and secrecy is where it draws its strength. Invisible barriers are not permanent because they are not sovereign. They exist under authority, not above it. Their influence depends on whether they are confronted or ignored. The moment spiritual authority is exercised, resistance begins to weaken. This is why prayer is not a passive act, but a confrontational one. Prayer identifies what logic cannot explain and challenges what effort cannot overcome. When prayer is engaged with understanding, it shifts conditions in ways that action alone cannot. It does not always remove the barrier instantly, but it destabilizes it, making movement possible again. Progress begins internally before it becomes visible externally. Many people misinterpret resistance as a sign to stop, when in reality it is often a sign to engage differently. Invisible barriers are not signals of failure, but indicators of opposition. Where there is no opposition, there is often no significance. Barriers tend to rise in response to purpose, alignment, and forward motion. They appear when momentum begins to build and direction becomes clear. This is why moments of clarity are sometimes followed by confusion, and seasons of hope are suddenly interrupted by heaviness. The barrier is attempting to interrupt consistency before progress becomes irreversible. Understanding that these barriers are not permanent restores confidence. It shifts the mindset from resignation to expectation. Instead of asking, why does this always happen? The focus becomes, What needs to be confronted? This perspective empowers rather than diminishes. It places responsibility not on self-blame but on spiritual engagement. When people stop internalizing every delay as a personal flaw, they regain emotional and mental strength. They begin to stand instead of withdraw, to speak instead of remain silent, to persist instead of retreat. Invisible barriers cannot survive sustained awareness and authority. They depend on distraction, fatigue, and doubt to maintain influence. When focus returns and faith is activated, their structure begins to collapse. Even when circumstances do not change immediately, internal alignment shifts first. Confidence returns, clarity sharpens, courage stabilizes. These internal shifts are evidence that the barrier is weakening. Even if external conditions have not yet caught up, progress is often happening before it is seen. The danger is not the presence of invisible barriers, but the acceptance of them as normal. Once resistance is normalized, stagnation feels justified and delay feels inevitable. But nothing that interferes with purpose has the right to permanence. Barriers are temporary by nature, even when they have been present for a long time. Duration does not equal authority. Something can exist for years and still have no legitimate power. What has been tolerated can still be removed. Invisible barriers respond to intentional confrontation. They lose power when named, challenged, and addressed through faith. Silence strengthens them, engagement weakens them. Every moment of clarity, every act of prayer, every refusal to settle applies pressure. Over time, pressure exposes cracks, and cracks lead to collapse. What once felt immovable begins to shift, not because circumstances suddenly become easy, but because resistance is no longer uncontested. Discernment is the ability to perceive what is operating beyond the reach of natural senses. It is not suspicion, imagination, or emotional sensitivity, but a clarity that comes from spiritual awareness. Many people look only at what is visible and judge their situation by what appears on the surface. Yet some of the most influential factors shaping outcomes are not immediately observable. Discernment allows a person to recognize patterns, motives, and resistance that logic alone cannot fully explain. It sharpens perception so that events are no longer viewed as isolated incidents, but as connected signals revealing a deeper reality at work. Without discernment, people often misdiagnose their struggles. They may confront symptoms while ignoring causes, reacting to surface-level problems rather than addressing the underlying influence driving them. This leads to cycles of repeated frustration. The same issues appear in different forms, locations, or relationships, creating the illusion of change without producing real progress. Discernment breaks this cycle by exposing the root rather than the manifestation. When the unseen is correctly identified, response becomes precise instead of reactive. The eyes see events, but discernment reads meaning. It notices timing, repetition, and atmosphere. It senses when something is out of alignment even if everything appears normal. A conversation may seem harmless, yet discernment recognizes subtle manipulation. An opportunity may appear attractive, yet discernment detects misdirection. A delay may look like failure, yet discernment understands it as protection or repositioning. This ability prevents unnecessary struggle by guiding decisions before damage is done. It allows people to avoid traps rather than recover from them later. Discernment does not function independently of humility. It requires the willingness to admit that not everything can be understood through experience or intellect alone. When pride dominates, perception narrows. Confidence becomes assumption, and assumption becomes error. Discernment thrives in stillness, reflection, and attentiveness. It listens more than it speaks and observes more than it reacts. This posture creates space for insight to surface, often through subtle impressions rather than dramatic revelations. What is revealed is not always comfortable, but it is always clarifying. Many people confuse discernment with judgment, yet they are fundamentally different. Judgment assigns blame, while discernment assigns understanding. Judgment divides, discernment navigates. Where judgment hardens the heart, discernment softens awareness. It does not rush to label people or situations, but seeks to understand what is influencing them. This prevents emotional entanglement with issues that require spiritual clarity rather than personal reaction. Discernment protects emotional energy by redirecting focus toward effective response rather than wasted resistance. The unseen often reveals itself through inconsistency. Discernment notices when effort and outcome do not align, when preparation and reward seem disconnected, when obedience is met with opposition rather than ease. These inconsistencies are not random, they are indicators. Discernment reads these signs and responds with strategy rather than frustration. Instead of forcing progress, it adjusts approach. Instead of retreating, it reinforces alignment. This adaptability preserves momentum even when conditions are challenging. Discernment grows through practice. It is strengthened by reflection, honesty, and intentional awareness. Every experience carries information, and discernment extracts meaning from it. When lessons are ignored, experiences repeat. When lessons are understood, patterns shift. Discernment accelerates growth by reducing unnecessary repetition. It enables people to move forward with confidence even when certainty is incomplete. Knowing everything is not required, perceiving enough is sufficient. In a world driven by speed, discernment requires patience. Quick decisions may feel productive, but they often bypass crucial insight. Discernment slows response just enough to prevent error. It creates space between stimulus and reaction, allowing wisdom to intervene. This pause can be the difference between advancement and setback. Those who cultivate discernment are not easily rushed into decisions that compromise long-term progress for short-term relief. Discernment also influences how people interpret opposition. Without it, resistance is seen as discouragement. With it, resistance is recognized as information. It reveals where boundaries need strengthening, where authority must be exercised, and where engagement must deepen. Opposition becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. It highlights areas that require attention rather than avoidance. When discernment is active, fear loses its grip. Fear thrives in uncertainty. But discernment replaces uncertainty with awareness. Even when outcomes are unknown, direction becomes clear. This clarity produces steadiness rather than anxiety. Decisions are made with conviction rather than desperation. Confidence is rooted not in control, but in understanding. Discernment does not eliminate challenges, but it transforms how they are navigated. It ensures that energy is invested where it produces results rather than wasted where it does not. It prevents overreaction to distractions and underreaction to threats. It aligns response with reality rather than perception. What the eyes cannot see often shapes what the hands experience. Discernment bridges this gap, translating unseen influence into informed action. It equips individuals to engage life with wisdom rather than impulse, awareness rather than assumption, clarity rather than confusion. Prayer is not a ritual performed out of habit. It is an act of authority exercised with intention. When prayer is understood correctly, it becomes a point of engagement where divine power intersects human reality. Unseen resistance does not respond to awareness alone, it responds to authority. And prayer is the channel through which that authority is activated. Many people pray hoping something will change, but effective prayer speaks from a position of alignment, not desperation. It does not beg circumstances to improve. It commands alignment with divine order. Unseen resistance operates quietly, often avoiding direct confrontation. It works through delay, distraction, wariness, and subtle discouragement. Because it is not physical, it cannot be confronted with physical tools. Logic cannot argue it away. Effort cannot overpower it, and persistence alone cannot dissolve it. Prayer addresses the level at which this resistance operates. It speaks into the unseen realm where influence is exerted before outcomes manifest. When prayer is released with understanding, it shifts conditions that human effort cannot reach. Divine authority is not something that must be earned through performance. It is something that must be activated through alignment. Prayer aligns intention with purpose and positions the individual to operate from authorization rather than wishful thinking. When authority is activated, resistance is no longer something to endure, but something to confront. This changes the posture of the one praying. Instead of reacting to pressure, they respond with clarity. Instead of absorbing opposition, they release direction. Many underestimate prayer because they associate it with passivity. In reality, prayer is confrontational. It identifies what is interfering and addresses it directly. It calls things into order and removes permission from what has been operating unchecked. When prayer is silent, resistance thrives. When prayer is specific, resistance weakens. Vague prayer produces vague outcomes, but intentional prayer applies pressure. Pressure exposes instability, and instability leads to collapse. Prayer also restores perspective. Unseen resistance often distorts perception, making obstacles appear larger than they are and strength appear smaller than it is. Prayer recalibrates this imbalance. It reminds the individual that resistance is subject, not sovereign. This awareness strengthens resolve. Confidence returns not because circumstances have changed, but because authority has been remembered. When authority is remembered, fear loses leverage. There is a difference between praying from emotion and praying from authority. Emotional prayer vents frustration. Authoritative prayer issues direction. Emotion is not wrong, but it is not sufficient. Authority requires understanding who is speaking and from where. Prayer that activates authority is rooted in identity, not intensity. Loudness does not equal power, and repetition does not equal effectiveness. What matters is alignment. When alignment is present, even simple words carry weight. Unseen resistance often intensifies when prayer begins to activate authority. This is not a sign of failure, but of impact. Resistance reacts when its influence is threatened. This reaction can manifest as increased distraction, sudden doubt, or temporary discomfort. Without understanding, this escalation can discourage continuation. With understanding, it confirms that pressure is being applied. Authority does not always remove resistance instantly, but it always disrupts it. Prayer also creates access. Some doors remain closed not because they are locked, but because permission has not been exercised. Authority opens what effort cannot. It grants access to clarity, timing, and favor. This access does not always appear dramatic, but it is effective. A conversation shifts, a decision changes, a delay dissolves. These changes often seem coincidental, but they are responses to authority being exercised in the unseen. Consistency in prayer sustains authority. Authority is not a one-time declaration, but a maintained position. When prayer becomes occasional, resistance regains space. When prayer becomes consistent, resistance loses ground. Consistency does not mean repetition of words, but reinforcement of alignment. Each moment of prayer reaffirms jurisdiction. It declares that interference is not tolerated and confusion is not accepted. Prayer also sharpens discernment. As authority is activated, awareness increases. What once felt confusing becomes identifiable. Patterns emerge and strategy becomes clear. This clarity prevents wasted effort. Energy is redirected from reacting to responding. Prayer does not remove responsibility, it enhances effectiveness. Action taken after prayer carries precision rather than strain. Unseen resistance cannot withstand sustained authority. It may linger, but it cannot dominate. Its influence diminishes as alignment strengthens. Even when circumstances appear unchanged, internal conditions shift first. Peace stabilizes, focus sharpens, and courage settles. These internal shifts are not emotional highs. They are indicators that authority is active. When the inner state changes, the outer state eventually follows. Prayer activates authority not by changing who God is, but by changing how the individual engages. It moves a person from hoping for relief to enforcing order. It replaces endurance with engagement and transforms waiting into positioning. Resistance thrives where authority is unexercised, but it weakens where authority is consistently applied. Delays often carry a negative reputation because they are associated with disappointment, frustration, and unmet expectations. When progress slows or outcomes take longer than anticipated, the immediate assumption is that something has gone wrong. Yet delay is not synonymous with denial. Denial is a closed door, while delay is a pause that serves a purpose. Understanding this distinction is essential for maintaining clarity and faith during seasons when movement feels restricted. Many people abandon what they were called to pursue not because it was wrong, but because it did not arrive on their preferred timeline. Delay has the ability to test perception. It reveals whether trust is rooted in outcome or alignment. When expectations are tied solely to timing, patience erodes quickly. But when focus shifts to preparation, growth continues even while results are pending. Delay often provides space for refinement that immediate success would bypass. Skills are sharpened, understanding deepens, and character stabilizes. What feels like stagnation on the surface may actually be development beneath it. One of the greatest dangers of delay is misinterpretation. Without discernment, delay is internalized as rejection, confidence weakens, motivation declines, and doubt begins to shape decisions. People may lower their standards or redirect their efforts prematurely, assuming the lack of immediate response is a signal to stop. In reality, delay often protects from outcomes that would be harmful if encountered too early. What arrives before readiness can overwhelm rather than advance. Delay also exposes the difference between urgency and importance. Not everything that feels urgent is essential, and not everything that is essential happens quickly. Some outcomes require sequencing, timing, and coordination beyond individual control. Delay ensures that conditions align before release. This alignment may involve other people, resources, or circumstances that must come into position. What appears as inactivity may actually be synchronization. There is also resistance that disguises itself as delay. Not every delay is passive. Some are strategic obstacles designed to discourage persistence. This is why delay must be interpreted rather than endured blindly. When delay is the result of resistance, engagement is required. When delay is the result of preparation, patience is required. Discernment determines the response. Without it, people may either force progress prematurely or wait passively when action is needed. Delay reshapes expectation. It challenges the assumption that speed equals success. In many cases, rapid advancement lacks sustainability. Foundations built too quickly often crack under pressure. Delay reinforces structure. It ensures that what is built can withstand opposition, complexity, and responsibility. What takes longer to form is often more resilient. This resilience becomes evident when challenges arise after progress finally begins. Emotionally, delay confronts insecurity. It surfaces fears related to worth, timing. Watching others advance while one remains stationary can intensify self-doubt. Without perspective, comparison becomes toxic. Delay then feels personal rather than purposeful. Understanding that timing is individualized restores equilibrium. Progress is not competitive, it is contextual. What is appropriate for one season may be destructive in another. Delay also trains endurance. It develops the ability to remain consistent without immediate reward. This consistency is crucial for long-term effectiveness. Many people can act with enthusiasm for a short period, but few can remain faithful when affirmation is absent. Delay reveals commitment. It separates those who are driven by results from those who are driven by calling. When delay is present, clarity becomes more important than speed. Reflection replaces reaction. Decisions made during delay carry more weight because they are not influenced by momentum or pressure. This stillness allows recalibration. Priorities are examined, motives are purified, and direction is refined. What emerges is often a clearer vision than what existed before the delay. Delay does not mean inactivity. It means preparation is happening in a different form. Internal alignment, strategic positioning, and relational connections often develop during these seasons. What appears quiet is not empty. It is structured. Delay is often where strength is built quietly so that success does not become a burden. The temptation during delay is to abandon or compromise. Yet what is delayed but aligned remains intact. Denial removes possibility, delay preserves it. Understanding this preserves hope. It prevents emotional withdrawal and impulsive redirection. Delay invites trust, not passivity. It requires engagement at a different level. Delay also exposes how pressure is handled. Impatience can produce unnecessary shortcuts. These shortcuts may deliver temporary relief but often create long-term consequences. Delay resists shortcuts by slowing access. This resistance is protective. It ensures that when progress occurs, it is supported by readiness rather than rushed desire. What matters during delay is not how long it lasts, but how it is navigated. The posture maintained during waiting determines the quality of what follows. Delay refines response. It teaches discernment, endurance, and alignment. These qualities remain valuable long after the delay ends, shaping future decisions and sustaining future progress. Spiritual alignment is the condition where intention, belief, and action move in the same direction. When alignment is present, effort flows with purpose rather than against it. Many limitations persist not because of lack of desire or ability, but because something is misaligned beneath the surface. Misalignment creates friction. It drains energy, delays progress, and produces confusion even in the presence of opportunity. When alignment is restored, resistance weakens, and what once required struggle begins to move with greater ease. Cycles of limitation often repeat because the underlying alignment has not changed. Circumstances may shift, locations may change, and strategies may be adjusted, yet the outcome remains similar. This repetition is not coincidence, it is indication. Alignment determines trajectory. Without alignment, movement occurs, but advancement does not. People remain busy without becoming effective. Spiritual alignment addresses the root rather than the pattern. It corrects direction rather than increasing speed. Alignment begins internally. It requires honesty about motives, priorities, and focus. When intention is divided, results become inconsistent. Many people desire breakthrough, but remain attached to comfort, familiarity, or control. This internal conflict weakens authority. Alignment resolves this tension by establishing clarity. Once clarity is present, decisions become simpler. Energy is no longer split between competing desires. Focus sharpens, and momentum becomes sustainable. Cycles of limitation thrive where compromise is tolerated. Small compromises accumulate over time, gradually reshaping expectation. What was once unacceptable becomes normal. What was once temporary becomes permanent. Alignment disrupts this normalization. It restores standards that were lowered out of fatigue or disappointment. When alignment returns, tolerance for limitation decreases. Acceptance gives way to confrontation, not through aggression but through conviction. Spiritual alignment also requires consistency. Alignment is not a moment but a maintained posture. It must be reinforced through daily choices, not occasional decisions. Inconsistency weakens impact. When alignment fluctuates, progress stalls. This is why breakthroughs that are not sustained often collapse back into old patterns. The issue is not lack of opportunity, but lack of maintained alignment. Alignment influences how resistance is encountered. When alignment is absent, resistance feels overwhelming. When alignment is present, resistance feels manageable. The same obstacle can produce exhaustion in one season and confidence in another, depending on alignment. Alignment does not eliminate opposition. It changes how opposition is processed. What once discouraged now informs. What once delayed now redirects. Cycles of limitation are often emotional as much as situational. Discouragement, frustration, and disappointment can become habitual responses. These emotional patterns reinforce limitation by shaping expectation. Alignment resets emotional posture. It replaces reaction with response. Emotional stability returns not because circumstances have changed, but because inner order has been restored. Alignment also clarifies timing. Many cycles repeat because actions are taken at the wrong time rather than the wrong place. Premature action produces resistance. Delayed action produces regret. Alignment sharpens sensitivity to timing, reducing unnecessary struggle. Decisions are made with awareness rather than impulse. This awareness preserves energy and prevents burnout. Relationships are also affected by alignment. Cycles of limitation often involve repeated relational patterns. Similar conflicts arise with different people. Similar disappointments recur in new environments. Alignment addresses what attracts these patterns. It shifts boundaries, expectations, and engagement. When alignment changes, relational dynamics change as well. What once drained now strengthens. What once confused now clarifies. Alignment restores authority. Authority weakens when actions contradict beliefs. When words and choices align, authority increases. This authority is not aggressive, it is stable. It carries weight because it is rooted in integrity. Resistance responds differently to integrity than to intensity. Alignment produces integrity, and integrity produces influence. Breaking cycles of limitation requires more than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Alignment stabilizes. Motivation pushes temporarily. Alignment sustains continually. When alignment is present, progress does not depend on emotional highs. It continues even during low energy seasons. This consistency disrupts cycles by introducing reliability where inconsistency once ruled. Alignment also reshapes identity. Many cycles persist because identity remains tied to limitation. People unconsciously expect delay, resistance, or disappointment. These expectations influence decisions. Alignment challenges these internal narratives. It redefines what is considered normal. Expansion replaces restriction. Possibility replaces resignation. Spiritual alignment is not about perfection. It is about direction. Small corrections in direction produce significant changes over time. When direction is corrected, cycles lose momentum, patterns weaken. What once felt inevitable begins to feel optional. Alignment creates space for new outcomes by dismantling old structures internally. As alignment strengthens, resistance loses familiarity. Limitation no longer feels comfortable or expected. It becomes noticeable rather than normal. This awareness is disruptive to cycles. It prevents automatic repetition. Choices become intentional rather than habitual. Breaking cycles requires sustained alignment. Each aligned decision applies pressure to limitation. Over time, this pressure produces change. The cycle does not break all at once, but it weakens incrementally. Progress becomes measurable. Confidence returns. Direction stabilizes. Alignment continues to reinforce movement forward rather than backward. Faith speaks before evidence appears, because faith is not a response to outcomes, but a declaration of alignment. It does not wait for permission from circumstances to be expressed. While logic waits for confirmation and emotion waits for reassurance, faith speaks from conviction. This is not denial of reality, but engagement with it at a deeper level. Faith recognizes that what is visible is not final, and what is invisible is not inactive. Speaking in faith is an act of positioning, not prediction. Many people silence their faith until results validate it. They believe after they see movement, change, or confirmation. Yet this reverses the order of spiritual engagement. Faith is not meant to echo progress, it is meant to initiate it. When faith speaks first, it establishes expectation. Expectation shapes perception, and perception influences response. What is spoken consistently becomes internalized, and what is internalized directs action. Faith-filled speech creates an internal environment that supports persistence, even when outcomes lag behind effort. Results often trail alignment. There is a gap between declaration and manifestation. This gap is where faith proves its authenticity. Anyone can speak confidently when progress is visible, but faith speaks when uncertainty dominates. This does not mean ignoring obstacles. It means refusing to grant them authority over identity or direction. Faith acknowledges difficulty without surrendering to it. The voice of faith does not argue with resistance. It overrides it by asserting truth repeatedly. Speech is a powerful tool because it reinforces belief. What is spoken reinforces what is believed, and what is believed influences behavior. Faith-based speech interrupts cycles of negativity that develop during delay and resistance. Without intentional speech, internal dialogue often defaults to fear, doubt, or frustration. These narratives weaken resolve and distort perspective. Faith speaks intentionally to counter these internal patterns. It replaces reactionary language with purposeful declaration. Faith-filled speech is not performative. It is not meant to impress others or convince skeptics. Its primary audience is the speaker. It trains the mind to align with purpose rather than pressure. Over time, this alignment becomes automatic. When challenges arise, the default response shifts from panic to confidence. This shift does not happen instantly. It is cultivated through consistent expression. Speaking before results appear requires courage. It exposes vulnerability because it risks disappointment. Yet faith does not eliminate risk, it reframes it. The risk of speaking in faith is less damaging than the risk of remaining silent and allowing doubt to dictate expectation. Silence often communicates agreement with limitation. Faith refuses that agreement. It speaks even when the voice trembles, even when evidence contradicts the declaration. There is also a distinction between hope and faith. Hope desires change. Faith declares it. Hope waits. Faith engages. Hope is emotional. Faith is intentional. Both have value, but faith moves beyond anticipation into activation. When faith speaks, it releases authority into the situation. This authority does not force outcomes, but creates conditions conducive to change. It shifts internal posture first, which eventually influences external response. Faith-filled speech also shapes endurance. When progress is slow, discouragement seeks to dominate. Faith counters this by reminding the speaker of alignment rather than outcome. It reinforces commitment independent of visible reward. This endurance is not passive waiting, but active standing. Faith keeps engagement alive during uncertainty. It prevents withdrawal and disengagement that often occur when results delay. The language of faith differs from positive thinking. Positive thinking focuses on optimism. Faith focuses on alignment. Optimism hopes things will work out. Faith declares that purpose is intact regardless of appearance. Faith does not deny setbacks. It contextualizes them. It frames obstacles as temporary rather than defining. This framing influences how challenges are approached. Instead of reacting emotionally, faith responds strategically. Faith speaks with consistency, not intensity. It does not rely on emotional peaks. Emotional speech fluctuates with mood. Faith-filled speech remains steady. This steadiness builds internal trust. The speaker begins to believe their own declarations, not because they are persuasive, but because they are consistent. Over time, this consistency stabilizes identity. Confidence becomes rooted rather than reactive. Speaking before results appear also guards against comparison. When others advance visibly, faith prevents internal collapse. It reinforces individualized timing. Faith speaks identity and direction regardless of external pace. This prevents discouragement that arises from measuring progress against others rather than purpose. Faith centers focus inward, strengthening resolve. Faith-filled speech influences decision-making. When belief is reinforced verbally, choices align more naturally. Fear-driven decisions lose appeal. Shortcuts lose attractiveness. Faith does not rush outcomes, it sustains alignment. This alignment produces decisions that support long-term progress rather than short-term relief. There are moments when silence feels safer. Speaking in faith can feel risky when circumstances are uncertain, yet silence often reinforces internal doubt. Faith speaks not to control outcomes, but to maintain authority over internal space. This internal authority is crucial. When inner alignment is preserved, outer conditions eventually respond. Faith speaks because it understands sequence. Declaration precedes manifestation. Alignment precedes evidence. Authority precedes access. Faith does not wait for doors to open to declare direction. It speaks while standing before closed doors, not as denial, but as preparation. When the door opens, posture is already established. Speaking in faith trains perception. It sharpens awareness of opportunities that align with declared direction. What was once overlooked becomes noticeable. Faith creates sensitivity to alignment. This sensitivity guides action subtly but effectively. Small decisions accumulate into significant movement. Faith speaks even when progress feels invisible. It trusts that unseen shifts are occurring. This trust sustains effort. It prevents burnout by anchoring energy to purpose rather than results. Faith does not exhaust itself trying to prove anything. It remains steady, consistent, and engaged. Knowing that what is declared with alignment eventually finds expression in form, heaven responds when purpose is pursued, not when convenience is protected. Purpose carries a weight that attracts attention in the spiritual realm. It is not passive intention or casual desire. It is alignment with assignment. When purpose is engaged, movement is initiated beyond the visible. Resistance often increases not because something is wrong, but because something meaningful is being activated. Purpose disrupts stagnation, and disruption invites response. Many people wait for certainty before pursuing purpose, but purpose rarely reveals itself fully before movement begins. Clarity unfolds through obedience, not observation. When steps are taken in alignment, understanding follows. Haven responds to motion, not hesitation. Stillness rooted in fear delays response, while movement rooted in purpose activates it. This is why partial clarity is often enough to begin. Purpose does not require complete understanding. It requires commitment. Pursuing purpose requires intentional sacrifice. Convenience resists purpose because purpose demands growth, adjustment, and sometimes discomfort. Comfort seeks preservation, purpose seeks expansion. When comfort is prioritized, alignment weakens. When purpose is prioritized, response intensifies. Heaven responds not to perfection but to pursuit. Effort aligned with purpose carries more weight than flawless execution without alignment. Purpose also refines focus. Distractions lose appeal when direction becomes clear. Energy that was once scattered begins to consolidate. This focus signals readiness. Heaven responds to readiness more than readiness responds to heaven. When focus sharpens, opportunities align, connections emerge, resources surface. These responses are not random. They are coordinated reactions to pursuit. There is a difference between interest and pursuit. Interest observes, pursuit engages. Interest entertains possibility, pursuit commits to process. Heaven responds to pursuit because pursuit demonstrates seriousness. It indicates willingness to endure process rather than consume outcome. Many desire results without responsibility. Purpose-driven pursuit accepts responsibility as part of fulfillment. Pursuing purpose also exposes resistance. This exposure is not punishment, it is confirmation. Resistance reveals where authority must be exercised and alignment reinforced. Without resistance, growth remains theoretical. Purpose matures through engagement with opposition. Each challenge navigated strengthens capacity. Heaven responds by increasing endurance, insight, and provision as pursuit continues. Purpose-driven pursuit reshapes identity. Identity shifts from passive receiver to active participant. This shift changes posture. Confidence increases not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because direction is established. Heaven responds to established direction. Ambiguity delays response. Clarity accelerates it. When purpose is clear, response becomes targeted rather than general. Consistency is critical in pursuit. Sporadic engagement weakens momentum. Purpose requires sustained attention. Heaven responds to consistency because consistency demonstrates trustworthiness. What is pursued consistently becomes stewarded effectively. This stewardship invites further responsibility. Expansion follows reliability. Purpose pursuit also demands courage. Fear attempts to interrupt alignment by exaggerating risk. Courage does not eliminate fear. It moves despite it. Heaven responds to courage because courage signals readiness to carry what is assigned. Avoidance delays response. Engagement accelerates it. Purpose is not self-centered ambition. It is contribution-oriented. When pursuit shifts from personal gain to impact, response multiplies. Heaven responds to impact because impact aligns with expansion. Purpose that blesses others attracts support beyond individual capacity. Isolation weakens pursuit. Alignment with service strengthens it. Timing is influenced by pursuit. Many wait for perfect conditions, but purpose creates conditions. Heaven responds when effort aligns with timing rather than waits for it. Movement adjusts timing. Stillness prolongs it. Purpose-driven action refines timing through engagement. Pursuit also requires adaptability. Purpose does not always unfold linearly. Adjustments are part of alignment, not deviation. Heaven responds to adaptability because adaptability reflects humility. Rigid pursuit resists instruction. Adaptable pursuit invites guidance. Guidance increases effectiveness. Purpose pursuit transforms waiting into preparation. Waiting without pursuit breeds frustration. Waiting with pursuit builds capacity. Heaven responds to prepared vessels. Preparation signals readiness. Readiness attracts release. Purpose is strengthened through resistance, clarified through process, and confirmed through response. Heaven does not respond to intention alone. It responds to alignment expressed through action. Purpose pursued becomes purpose activated. Activation invites response. Response sustains pursuit. When purpose is pursued, internal alignment stabilizes, doubt weakens, confidence grows. This internal shift signals maturity. Heaven responds to maturity by increasing trust. Increased trust brings greater responsibility. Responsibility expands influence. Purpose pursuit demands endurance. Initial enthusiasm fades, but commitment remains. Heaven responds to endurance because endurance demonstrates faithfulness. What is endured with alignment produces lasting impact. Pursuing purpose also clarifies boundaries. Distractions are recognized sooner. Misalignments are corrected faster. Heaven responds to clarity because clarity reduces waste. Focused pursuit conserves energy and maximizes effectiveness. Purpose does not require applause. It requires alignment. Heaven responds regardless of recognition. Validation is not the source of response, alignment is. Purpose pursued quietly can produce profound response. Heaven responds when purpose is pursued because pursuit reflects agreement. Agreement invites collaboration. Collaboration produces movement. Movement produces manifestation. Purpose pursued becomes purpose supported. Breakthrough rarely announces itself with noise or spectacle. It begins quietly, beneath the surface, in places that are not immediately visible. Long before circumstances shift, something internal starts to move. The unseen is where foundations are laid. Where resistance is confronted and where alignment is established, many people look for breakthrough in external change, but the true beginning happens internally where belief, expectation, and authority converge. The unseen is where decisions are solidified. Before action becomes visible, commitment must be settled internally. Doubt weakens commitment, but clarity strengthens it. When clarity is established in the unseen, action follows with confidence rather than hesitation. This internal resolution determines how external challenges are met. Without it, progress remains inconsistent. With it, persistence becomes natural. Breakthrough begins in the unseen because influence originates there. Thoughts shape behavior, beliefs shape choices, expectations shape perception. When these internal elements are misaligned, external progress stalls regardless of effort. The unseen governs the seen. This is why addressing internal resistance is more effective than battling external obstacles repeatedly. When the inner posture shifts, outer conditions begin to respond. Many abandon their pursuit because they see no immediate evidence of change. They assume that nothing is happening. In reality, unseen shifts often take time to consolidate. Alignment must stabilize before manifestation occurs. Just as roots develop before a structure rises, internal preparation precedes visible progress. What appears delayed is often developing depth. The unseen is also where authority is exercised. Authority is not always loud or dramatic. It is steady, confident, and intentional. When authority is established internally, resistance loses leverage, fear diminishes, confusion clears. These shifts may not be visible to others, but they are foundational. Without them, visible success lacks sustainability. Breakthrough begins in the unseen because that is where permission is either granted or revoked. Many obstacles persist because they have been tolerated internally. Acceptance strengthens limitation, awareness weakens it. When an internal decision is made to no longer tolerate restriction, pressure is applied. This pressure initiates change long before results appear. Internal alignment also shapes patience. When alignment is strong, waiting does not produce frustration, it produces readiness. Impatience often signals misalignment. When purpose is clear and commitment is firm, waiting becomes purposeful rather than passive. This posture sustains energy during delay and prevents emotional exhaustion. The unseen is where faith is cultivated. Faith is not sustained by evidence but by conviction. Conviction grows through intentional reinforcement. Internal dialogue matters. What is repeatedly rehearsed internally becomes the lens through which circumstances are interpreted. Faith-filled internal dialogue stabilizes expectation. This stability prevents collapse when challenges arise. Breakthrough begins in the unseen because that is where fear is confronted honestly. Fear often hides beneath distraction, busyness, or delay. When the unseen is ignored, fear remains unaddressed. When the unseen is engaged, fear is exposed. Exposure weakens fear's influence. Courage grows as fear loses dominance. Internal clarity precedes external opportunity. Many opportunities are missed not because they were absent, but because perception was misaligned. When the unseen is addressed, awareness sharpens. Opportunities become visible. Timing becomes discernible. Decisions become confident. This clarity accelerates progress without strain. The unseen is also where endurance is built. Endurance is not created by visible success, but by internal resolve. When resolve is firm, setbacks do not derail progress, they inform it. Endurance transforms obstacles into instruction rather than interruption. This transformation happens internally before it is reflected externally. Breakthrough begins in the unseen because identity is shaped there. How individuals see themselves influences how they engage the world. Limitation often persists because identity remains tethered to past failure or delay. When identity shifts internally, behavior changes naturally. New patterns emerge. Old cycles weaken. Internal alignment also affects how resistance is interpreted. Without alignment, resistance feels personal and discouraging. With alignment, resistance feels informational. It reveals where reinforcement is needed. This shift in interpretation reduces emotional reactivity. Calm replaces anxiety. Strategy replaces frustration. The unseen is where consistency is formed. Consistency is not a product of motivation, but of alignment. Motivation fluctuates. Alignment sustains. When alignment is present, effort continues even when enthusiasm fades. This consistency applies pressure to resistance over time. Pressure produces movement. Breakthrough begins internally because that is where responsibility is embraced. External blame delays growth. Internal responsibility accelerates it. This responsibility does not involve self-criticism but ownership. Ownership empowers action. When responsibility is accepted, options expand. Internal shifts often go unnoticed because they are subtle, yet they are powerful. Increased peace, sharpened focus, renewed confidence are indicators that breakthrough is forming. These signs should not be dismissed. They signal progress at a foundational level. The unseen is where trust is established. Trust sustains effort during uncertainty. Without trust, progress becomes conditional. With trust, engagement remains steady. This steadiness is attractive to opportunity. Breakthrough begins in the unseen because manifestation is the final stage, not the first. What appears suddenly is often the result of long internal preparation. When the unseen is addressed intentionally, the seen follows naturally. Those who understand this do not rush outcomes. They invest in alignment. They strengthen foundations. They confront internal resistance. They cultivate clarity. They maintain authority internally. When visible change arrives, it is not overwhelming because readiness preceded it. The unseen is not empty space. It is active territory. It is where direction is established, power is activated, and breakthrough is initiated long before it becomes visible.